The mess hall of Station Kepler 442b buzzed with the usual cacophony of 27 different species attempting to coexist in one cramped space. Ambassador Chen Wei sat at his usual corner table, methodically working through his protein rations, while observing the intricate social hierarchies that had formed among the various delegations. The Zephyrian contingent dominated the center tables, their crystalline exoskeletons catching the artificial light as they consumed their mineral supplements. With characteristic arrogance, the Veltar merchants clustered near the food dispensers, their multiple arms gesturing animatedly as they negotiated deals between bites. Even the usually solitary Kreks had formed small groups, their scaled heads bobbing in what passed for conversation among their kind. But it was the small figure huddled in the far corner that caught Chen's attention, and had been catching it for the past 4 days. Kira was her name, though few bothered to remember it. She was Threnody, one of only 3 representatives from a species that had recently discovered faster-than-light travel and petitioned for inclusion in the Galactic Trade Consortium. At barely 4 feet tall, with pale blue skin and large, luminous eyes that seemed to hold the depth of oceans, she should have been impossible to overlook. Yet that's exactly what everyone was doing. Chen watched as Kira approached the Zephyrian table, her translator device clutched in her small hands. The mechanical voice that emerged was soft, almost apologetic. "Excuse me, honored delegates. I was hoping to discuss the mineral rights treaty that affects both our homeworlds." "The Threnody have nothing we want," came the harsh, crystalline response from Ambassador Zeth Ka. "Your species contributes nothing of value. We suggest you learn your place." The other Zephyrians clicked their approval, a sound like breaking glass that made several nearby species flinch. Kira's shoulders sagged, but she persisted. "Perhaps we could share knowledge instead? Our people have developed some interesting terraforming techniques. Knowledge?" Zeth Ka's laughter was like wind chimes in a hurricane. "From a species that barely mastered spaceflight? Return to your corner, child. The adults are speaking." The dismissal was cruel, but what followed was worse. As Kira retreated, Chen noticed she wasn't carrying a meal tray. Again. He'd been watching for days now, and the pattern was becoming clear. Each time Kira approached the food dispensers, she was somehow blocked, cut off, or redirected by the other species. The few times she'd managed to reach the front of a line, the dispensers had mysteriously malfunctioned or run out of compatible nutrients. The Veltar merchant Prince Grixtal had made it particularly clear that Threnody credits weren't welcome at his private food stalls. "Supply and demand," he'd wheezed through his breathing apparatus. "No demand for Threnody friendship means no supply of Threnody food." Chen had seen this before, though never so systematic. It was a form of soft warfare, economic and social, pressure designed to force a species to withdraw their petition for consortium membership. Starve them out, literally and figuratively, until they had no choice but to leave. The worst part was how the other humans were reacting, or rather, how they weren't reacting at all. Ambassador Harrison from the North American Federation had actually chuckled when Kira was turned away from the Nexus Corporation's executive dining area. "Natural selection in action," he'd commented, to his aide. "If they can't hack it at this level, they'll never survive real galactic politics." Dr. Sarah Martinez from the European Space Collective had been more subtle but equally dismissive. When Chen had mentioned the situation during their weekly briefing, she'd shrugged. "We can't save every species that isn't ready for this arena." Chen. "The consortium has standards for a reason. Even Captain Rodriguez from the Mars Colonial Authority had offered only hollow platitudes." "Look, I feel bad for the kid too. But we can't appear to play favorites. The other species are watching. How we handle this? We need to maintain our neutrality." Neutrality. Chen tasted the word like ash in his mouth as he watched Kira's hands tremble slightly, not from emotion, but from hunger. How long had it been since she'd had a proper meal? Her species' physiology required specific nutrients, every 36 hours, something Chen had learned during his xenobiology training. By his calculations, she was approaching critical deficiency. The mess hall erupted in fresh laughter as Zethka regaled his table with what seemed to be an amusing anecdote about primitive species and their pathetic attempts at diplomacy. Chen didn't need a translator to understand that Kira was the subject of the joke. That's when something inside him snapped. Chen stood slowly, his chair scraping against the metal floor with a sound that somehow cut through the ambient noise. Conversations didn't stop, but they quieted as heads turned to watch the human diplomat walking across the mess hall with purposeful strides. He stopped in front of Kira's tiny table, where she sat staring at her empty hands, trying to make herself invisible. Her large eyes looked up at him with a mixture of hope and wariness that broke something in his chest. Chen didn't speak loudly. He didn't need to. In the sudden hush that had fallen over the nearby tables, his words carried clearly. "You can eat with me." The simple statement hung in the air like a challenge. Chen pulled out the chair across from Kira and sat down, never breaking eye contact with her. "I was just about to get dessert. The chocolate synthesis here is terrible, but the ice cream isn't bad. What do you think?" For a moment, Kira just stared. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she replied, I haven't eaten in 4 days. Then we should fix that right now." Chen stood and extended his hand. "Come on, let's go raid the dessert section first, then work our way back to real food. My treat." As they walked toward the food dispensers together, Chen felt the weight of dozens of eyes upon them. He heard Zethka's sharp intake of breath, the rustle of Veltar robes, the nervous chittering of lesser species unsure of how to react to this shift in the social order. But what he heard most clearly was the sound of Kira's breathing steadying, her steps becoming more confident as she realized she was no longer alone. The revolution began not with weapons or grand speeches, but with two beings walking side by side toward the promise of a shared meal and the radical idea that dignity was not something that needed to be earned through strength or wealth, but something that belonged to all sentient life. Behind them, the mess hall slowly resumed its conversations, but the tone had changed. The laughter was more nervous now, the cruel jokes falling flat. Because sometimes it only takes one person willing to stand up and say, "You can eat with me,"